The wind was the first thing I remember that night. It came hard, dry, and loud, scraping across the land like it was looking for someone to punish. Then, the rain followed, heavy and cold, coming down in sheets that stung my skin and soaked me straight through. I had been running so long I didn't know where my feet ended and the earth began. They were raw, bleeding in places where the stones cut too deep, but I kept moving. If I stopped, I knew he would catch me, and if he caught me, it was over. The barn was the only thing I saw through the storm. A shadow, a shape with light flickering just beyond the doorway. I didn't think, I just staggered toward it, clutching the satchel to my chest like it was the last part of me I had left. My dress, once silk, was torn to rags, clinging to me in wet strands. My breath came fast, too loud in my own ears, and I prayed the storm might cover it. Inside smelled of hay and leather. I wanted to sink down and disappear in it, to hide in the piles and make myself small enough that the world would forget me. But the horses knew I was there. One of them kicked at the stall, snorting sharp enough to betray me. And then I heard his boots. Heavy, slow, measured steps. The kind of steps of a man who isn't afraid of whatever's waiting. I froze, heart hammering so hard I thought it would give me away. He came closer and I saw him in the glow of the lantern. Tall, broad, worn down in the face like someone who had seen too much. His eyes were steady, his hand on the pistol at his belt. When I stumbled out from behind the hay, I dropped to my knees without meaning to. My voice cracked before I could think. "Don't shoot, please, please don't shoot." He didn't lower the gun right away. He stepped closer, the light catching the lines of his face, and I knew he was measuring me, deciding whether I was a threat or just another piece of trouble dropped on his land. "I'm not armed," I whispered. My teeth chattered from the cold. "I swear it, I need somewhere to hide." For a moment, the silence stretched too long, the storm outside filling the space where his answer should have been. Then he asked, his voice rough but calm, "You running from someone?" "Yes." The word broke out of me, sharp and desperate. "Yes, he's hunting me." He studied me a long time before his eyes dropped to my satchel. I clutched it tighter, afraid he'd take it. He only said, "You're bleeding." I reached up, surprised to feel the cut at my temple. I hadn't even noticed it. "It's not deep," I murmured. He holstered his weapon, though I could see the way his hand lingered near it, not fully trusting me. "I've got a blanket in the tack room," he said. "Don't move." Something in me loosened then. Not relief exactly, but a sliver of air where panic had been. When he came back and laid the blanket over my shoulders, I wrapped it so tight around me. My hands shook. The warmth felt foreign, almost painful against my frozen skin. "You can stay in the loft tonight," he said. "It's warmest up there. I'll bring food." I looked at him properly then. His eyes were dark, shadowed, but they didn't hold cruelty. Only a kind of heaviness I recognized, like he carried ghosts too. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, and as he turned to go, he stopped at the door. His voice was quiet, almost like he was talking to himself. "If anyone comes here looking, I didn't see you. And you never saw me." The rain swallowed him up as he stepped back into the night. That was the first night I met Silas McCrae, a man who had every reason to turn me away, a man who should have, but he didn't. And I can tell you now, my story would have ended in that storm if not for him. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay awake in the loft, blanket pulled tight, watching shadows stretch across the beams as the lantern swayed below. Every creak made me jump. Every gust of wind rattling the shutters felt like footsteps coming closer. My fingers never stopped moving. I scratched at the place on my wrist where the iron once dug in, skin that would never quite heal smooth. Downstairs, I heard him moving. Silas. He stayed awake too, knife scraping against stone as he sharpened it. I didn't know why he kept watch. Maybe he didn't trust me. Maybe he was waiting to see if someone followed. But part of me wondered if it was something else. If he was watching the door not for himself, but for me. That thought carried me until morning. If you've walked with me this far, if you've felt the storm and the fear, then I'll ask you something plain. Like this video, if Ember's story means something to you. Leave a comment, tell me what stayed in your mind, what caught your heart. And subscribe to the channel because this isn't just my story. It's about all the voices that were silenced and the ones still waiting to be heard. This was the beginning. The night I stepped into Silas McCrae's barn and found the one man who didn't turn me away. The night I began to remember who I was. Ember Clara McCrae. The morning after that storm felt unreal, like I had woken into a life that wasn't mine. The rain had stopped, but the world was soaked through, dripping from the rafters and running off the eaves in silver lines. I sat wrapped in that blanket he'd given me, its weight still carrying his scent of leather and smoke, and I listened to the barn creak as if it too had been awake all night. My body was bone-tired, but my heart beat restless, afraid it would all vanish if I closed my eyes for too long. I heard him outside before I saw him. Silas McCrae. The scrape of a shovel, the low grunt of a man who knew the rhythm of hard work, not speaking to anyone but the earth itself. I crept to the loft's edge and watched him through a gap in the wood. He moved steady, not in a rush, not lazy either, just certain like each step was chosen. His hair was graying at the temples, his shoulders broad but stooped a little as if he carried something heavier than age. I should have been afraid. Men had only ever been danger to me. They wanted, they took, and when they were done, they reminded me how small I was. But this man didn't look up, didn't even try to find me. It was as though he had already decided that if I was still there come morning, that was my choice. That silence, that leaving me be, it was the strangest kind of mercy. I tried to rise, but my legs trembled so hard the ladder blurred beneath me. I had run too far on too little, and every step felt like I was carrying stones inside my bones. He must have heard me because suddenly he was there at the barn door, lantern light replaced by morning sun on his face. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me, not harsh, not soft either, just steady. "You're still here," he said at last. I clutched the blanket tighter, nodding. I didn't know where else to go. "You eat?" His voice was low, almost rough, but there was no edge of command to it. "No." My throat burned saying it. He set his shovel aside, wiped his hands against his trousers, and jerked his head toward the cabin I hadn't noticed beyond the barn. "Come on, then." The last thing I wanted was to step into a stranger's home, but hunger gnawed sharp and mean inside me. I followed him, every muscle ready to bolt if he turned. His cabin was simple, built solid out of logs, with a small porch and a door that groaned when he opened it. Inside was darker, cooler, the smell of wood smoke clinging to everything. He pointed at a chair by the table. "Sit." I sat, my hands folded tight, nails biting into my palms. He moved about the small kitchen without a word, setting a pan on the stove, cutting bacon, dropping it to sizzle. The sound filled the room, almost drowning out the pounding in my ears. I realized then I had never been fed by a man who expected nothing in return. My stomach twisted at the strangeness of it. He set a plate in front of me. Just bacon and bread, simple enough. But when the first bite touched my tongue, my eyes stung with tears. He didn't sit across from me, didn't watch me eat. He stood by the stove, arms crossed, staring at the firebox like it was safer than looking at me. After a while, he said, "Name?" The word stuck in my throat. I hadn't said it in so long, not out loud. Names had a way of binding you to things, and I had wanted to disappear. But the sound of his voice, rough but waiting, made me whisper, "Ember." His brow furrowed, not with disbelief, but something else. He nodded once. "Ember." Hearing it spoken back was like someone pressing a warm hand against a bruise. I wanted to ask his name, though I already knew it. Folks whispered it in towns when they thought no one listened. A man who had once fought, once killed, now living alone with ghosts. Still, I said it, my voice soft. "And you?" He looked at me then, really looked as though weighing whether I deserved to hear it. "Silas," he said. Just that. Silas. The sound of it was solid, like stone under my feet. Silence stretched between us again, but it wasn't empty. It was something that gave me space to breathe. Space I hadn't felt in years. After I finished, I whispered, "Thank you." He only nodded, as though it wasn't worth speaking about, but as I saw the way his shoulders shifted, the faintest release of something held too tight. That day was the first I began to believe that maybe survival wasn't just about running. Maybe, just maybe, it could be about staying. That's how I came to know Silas McCrae. Not through promises, not through questions, but through silence. Through food set down in front of me without demand. Through a name spoken back to me like it still mattered. And if you're here with me, listening to how it began, then I ask you kindly, stay with me. Like this video if Ember's voice reached you. Leave a comment and tell me what you felt in her words. And don't forget to subscribe, so her story, and the story of those like her, keeps finding its way to ears willing to listen. This was only the second step on a long road. But it was the first time I realized I wasn't invisible anymore. It was the silence that startled me most. Not the heavy, dangerous kind I'd grown used to, where a man's quiet meant his anger was waiting, ready to strike. No, this silence was different. It breathed. It gave room. It let me exist without being asked to give anything back. That morning after he fed me, I stayed near the table while Silas worked outside. Through the small window, I watched him chop wood, the swing of his axe steady. Sure, like the beat of a drum. Each strike was clean, not frantic, not cruel. Just work being done because it needed doing. There was something grounding in it, something that made me believe the world wouldn't collapse under my feet if I took one more breath. I wanted to help, but my hands shook when I tried to fold the blanket he'd given me. I wasn't ready to stand beside a man in the open, wasn't ready to make myself seen in daylight. My body remembered too much, carried too many scars you couldn't see. But inside, a small voice whispered, "Maybe someday." When he came back in, he didn't look at me with impatience or surprise that I hadn't moved. He just set the wood by the stove, brushed sawdust from his shirt, and poured water into a tin cup. Then, without asking, he set it in front of me. "Drink," he said. My fingers trembled as I lifted it. The water was cool, sharp against my parched throat. It slid down, and for a moment I thought I might cry. Not from sorrow, but from the sheer kindness of being offered something simple, without cost. I whispered, "Thank you." He only nodded, leaning against the counter with his arms folded. His eyes stayed on the fire, not on me. That was his way, never pressing, never staring too long. I realized then that Silas McCrae wasn't a man who needed to fill the air with words. His presence was enough. Later, when he stepped back outside, I followed him to the doorway. My heart pounded as I leaned against the frame, unsure if I belonged there, unsure if standing in the same sun as him meant I was taking too much. He noticed but didn't call me back in. Instead, he paused, wiped sweat from his brow, and asked softly, "You ride?" I froze. The question hit a wound deep inside me. I shook my head. "Then you'll learn," he said simply, as if it wasn't a challenge but a fact waiting for its day. I didn't answer. My throat locked. But something in me lit at the thought. I'd always wanted to ride, wanted the freedom of a horse carrying me farther than men's hands ever could. That he thought I might one day. It made the world tilt a little, in the best way. That night, I stayed near the hearth. He took the chair. I curled on the floor with the blanket, close enough to the fire's warmth, but not so close I'd feel cornered. The crackle of wood filled the room, and Silas sat sharpening a knife. The sound of stone against steel, a steady rhythm. My fear told me to keep watching him, but my body was too tired. My eyes slipped shut. When I woke, the blanket was tucked tighter around me. He hadn't touched me, hadn't moved me, just covered me better, then left me to sleep. That small act unraveled something knotted tight in my chest. For years, I had been braced for the taking. Silas was teaching me without saying a word that not every man wanted to own what he saw. In the dark, I whispered to myself, maybe I can stay. Maybe I can belong somewhere. My voice was barely a breath, but saying it out loud made it real. The silence between us wasn't emptiness anymore. It was beginning to feel like safety. And to those of you listening to me now, if you've ever known the weight of silence, if you've ever longed for it to be a comfort instead of a cage, then you know how much this meant. I share these words not just as a story, but as a piece of myself. If it touched something in you, I'd be grateful if you'd press that like button. Leave a comment. Tell me what silence has meant in your life. And if you want to walk further with me, hit subscribe so we can keep walking together, one chapter at a time. Because sometimes it isn't the loud moments that change us. Sometimes it's the quiet ones, the ones that say, "You're safe now. Stay as long as you need." There are some mornings when I wake with the sun spilling through the cracks of the shutters, and for a moment, I forget the weight I've carried. I forget the sound of boots chasing me, the smell of sweat and whiskey on men who thought I was theirs to break. In that half breath between sleep and waking, I feel almost whole. But then my body remembers, and the scars stitched into my skin whisper that forgetting is dangerous. That morning, Silas had already gone out to the barn. I heard the low rumble of his voice, soft, talking to the horse like it was an old friend. It startled me at first, hearing him speak so easily to the animal when he gave so few words to people. I wrapped the blanket tighter around me and listened. It was steady, patient. The horse snorted in answer, as if the two of them had their own language I wasn't yet invited into. When he came back, his boots left mud on the floor, and he set a small sack on the table. "Cornmeal," he said. Just that. No story of where he got it, no warning about what it cost. He just said the word like he was giving me the choice. Take it or leave it, but it was mine to use. I nodded, ran my hand across the rough fabric of the sack, and felt a small warmth bloom in my chest. Nobody had ever trusted me with anything that mattered before. We worked in silence most of that day. Him mending a fence out back, me cleaning the table with a rag worn thin. I didn't have to fill the air with words. Didn't have to prove I was worth the food or the roof. That freedom unsettled me, though. I kept waiting for the moment when he'd slam the door and tell me I had overstayed. Fear sits deep in the bones, and mine was used to being told I was only worth the taking, never the keeping. When the sun dipped low, Silas came inside, shoulders broad with sweat and dust. He leaned the rifle against the wall and looked at me for a long moment. Not sharp, not demanding, just steady. Finally, he said, "Men'll come looking. You should know that." My stomach dropped. The air seemed to thicken until I could hardly breathe. My hands clenched the rag I'd been twisting until it tore. I managed to whisper, "If they come, they'll take me back." He shook his head once. "Not while you're here." The words landed like stones in water, rippling through me. I wanted to believe them, wanted to rest in them. But trust is a hard thing when your whole life has been betrayal. I swallowed, my voice trembling. "You don't know them. You don't know what they'll do." His eyes met mine then, dark, unflinching, carrying the weight of his own battles. "I've seen men like them. I've fought worse. You stay close to the house, and you'll be safe." Safe. The word felt too big for me, like a coat I wasn't strong enough to wear. But I nodded, because some part of me needed to hold on to it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the fire, listening to the night sounds pressing against the walls, the coyotes in the distance, the wind dragging across the roof. Every creak made my heart race. Silas sat in his chair with the rifle across his lap, not because danger was at the door, but because he wanted me to see it. He wanted me to know he was ready, that nothing would reach me without going through him first. I whispered into the dark, almost ashamed to let the words free. "Why are you doing this? Why not send me away?" He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the fire. "Because you deserve better than running." Something cracked in me then, not in a way that hurt, but in a way that let a little light in. No one had ever said I deserved better. Not once. I wrapped my arms around myself and let the tears come, silent and burning. It wasn't freedom yet. It wasn't trust without fear, but it was a beginning. And for those of you hearing my voice tonight, I wonder if you've ever felt that. The fear that someone will come back for you, that the past will tear you from the little safety you found. I know what it is to live inside that shadow, but I also know what it feels like when someone finally stands and says, "Not here, not anymore." If my story touches you, I'd ask something simple. Tap that like button, share your own thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you can walk through the rest of this with me. Because the truth is, none of us can face the shadows alone. Sometimes it takes another soul, steady and silent, to hold the line, until we find our strength. And that's what Silas McCrae was teaching me even before I knew how to believe it. The days began to take on a rhythm I hadn't known in years, a rhythm that wasn't ruled by fear or by the crack of a man's voice. It was slower, steadier, like the rise and fall of the wind across the plains. I found myself rising with the light, not because anyone ordered me to, but because the sound of Silas moving about the cabin gave me reason to stand. I would stir the fire back to life, set water to boil, and watch his shape pass by the window, broad and sure against the dawn. There was a comfort in the small things, though I almost didn't trust them. The way he left the bucket full at the door when he came back from the well, so I wouldn't have to carry it. The way he stacked the woodpile neat as a promise, like he was saying without words, "You'll be warm here." One morning, I caught myself humming as I scrubbed the pan, a sound so foreign that I froze mid-breath. My heart beat hard in my chest. I thought, was that me? The silence that followed felt louder than the tune, and I half expected Silas to step inside and ask what I thought I was doing, daring to be lighthearted. But he didn't. He came in, set his hat on the peg, and said nothing at all. He only glanced at the pan in my hands, nodded like he approved, and sat down to pull on his boots. I realized then that I didn't have to stop. If I wanted to hum, I could hum. If I wanted to fill the silence with something of mine, I was free to do it. That freedom was a dangerous thing. It set roots in me where I had thought the ground was barren. Later that week, Silas handed me a pistol. His hand was steady, his voice low. "You should know how," he said. I stared at it like it might burn me. "I've never..." "Then you'll learn," he said. The weight of it in my palm sent a shiver through me. All my life, weapons had been things that threatened me, never things I could hold. My hands shook, and I hated that they did. Silas watched me, not unkind, not impatient. "Breathe," he said. "Hold it like you'd hold a cup. Firm, but not too tight." I did as he said, though my heart raced. He stood behind me, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel the steadiness in his presence. He pointed toward an old barrel at the fence line. "Aim there." My first shot cracked into the dirt, wide and wild. I flinched, ears ringing. I waited for anger, for mockery. But Silas only said, "Again." So I did, again and again, until the barrel wore a fresh scar of lead. When I finally lowered the gun, my arms heavy, he nodded once. "Good." That one word settled in me like a seed, small but alive. For the first time in a long while, I felt something stir that wasn't fear. It was strength, raw and trembling. But mine. That night, when the wind rattled the shutters, I didn't curl small on the cot. I sat by the fire with the pistol near at hand, not because I expected danger that moment, but because I wanted to remind myself I wasn't helpless anymore. Silas hadn't given me safety in the way of a locked door or a hidden place. He'd given me something better. He'd given me a way to stand. I thought about all the times before when I was told my voice was worthless, my hands only meant to serve. I thought about the way the world had treated me like a thing to be passed, hidden, or owned. Sitting there by that fire, I whispered to myself, "No more." My voice cracked, but I said it again, "No more." And though Silas said nothing, I saw the way his eyes flicked to me, soft and steady, like he'd heard me even when he wasn't meant to. The days stretched longer. and the work grew heavier, but I found myself wanting to do it. I wanted to sweep the floor, mend the torn shirt, stir the pot. Not because I owed it, but because it meant this place was mine too. Each chore was a stitch in a fabric I thought I'd never wear again. A home. A life. Still, at night, the fear crept in, whispering that it could all be taken. The men from my past would ride in and tear it away. But then I'd look at the wood stacked neat, the rifle leaning ready, the small cup Silas had set aside just for me on the shelf. Those things told a different story. A story where I was no longer the girl in the dark, but a woman learning to stand in the light. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again. It was just after supper when I first felt the change in the air, like the wind had carried a warning before the sound ever reached us. The dogs stirred before I did, their ears pricking, their low growls vibrating through the cabin floor. I froze, my hand halfway to the pan I'd been drying. My whole body knew it before my mind caught up. Someone was near. Silas rose, without a word, moving with that steady calm of his, though I could see the line of tension in his shoulders. He crossed to the rifle leaning by the door, and just the sight of him standing there, tall and unshaken, steadied me some. But the truth was, I couldn't stop my hands from trembling. Every shadow outside looked like a figure from my past. Every hoofbeat, real or imagined, sounded like the return of the men who once claimed to own me. "Stay here," Silas said quietly. His voice was deep, low, carrying no fear. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him I wasn't the same broken girl who'd once hidden behind walls, that I had a pistol now, and I knew how to use it. But the words tangled in my throat. All I managed was a whisper. "Don't go far." He gave the smallest nod, then stepped out onto the porch. I stood there clutching the pan like a shield, straining to hear. A horse shifted in the dark. Then a man's voice called, sharp and unwelcome. "Ward, you in there?" My stomach dropped. The name alone meant nothing, but the tone. It was the sound of men who expected to be obeyed. I could almost feel my old fear crawling back, telling me to shrink, to disappear. But Silas's voice cut through it like flint striking steel. "You've got business, state it." The other man laughed, low and mocking. "We're looking for a girl, pale thing, scar on her cheek. Goes by Ember now, but that ain't her real name. She belongs to Curtis Langford." The pan slipped from my hands and clattered against the floor. I pressed my fist to my mouth, fighting the urge to scream. They had come. My past had found me like I always feared it would. Silas didn't so much as shift his stance. "Ain't no one belongs to Langford here," he said. "She's here," the rider shot back. "We know it. Best hand her over before things get ugly." I wanted to run to the door, to stand beside Silas, the way he had taught me to stand. But my legs felt like lead. My breath caught shallow. The little strength I'd found in the days before trembled under the weight of those words. Belongs. That word cut deep, reminding me of nights when I was no more than a name on a man's ledger. But then I looked down and saw the pistol on the table where Silas had left it. My hand closed around it before I even thought. It felt heavier tonight, but not as foreign. I walked to the door, each step unsteady but mine, and when I opened it, the cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of horses and sweat and something fouler. Control. The rider's eyes found me, and he grinned. "There she is." My grip tightened. I raised the pistol, the barrel steady, though my heart raced like a wild drum. "I don't belong to him," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I don't belong to any of you." For a moment, silence stretched between us, taut as wire. Then the man's grin faltered. He hadn't expected me to speak, hadn't expected me to stand. Silas's voice came low, steady as the ground beneath my feet. "You heard her. Ride on." The man spat in the dirt, muttered something under his breath, and with a yank of the reins, turned his horse. The sound of hooves faded into the night. Only then did I lower the pistol, my whole body trembling so hard I thought I might collapse. Silas closed the door behind us, set the rifle aside, and looked at me. His eyes weren't sharp with reproach, but soft, steady, proud in a way I couldn't quite bear. I sank down by the fire, the pistol still in my hand, and whispered, "I thought they'd take me. I thought it was all gonna end." He crouched in front of me, his hand not reaching, just resting on the hearthstone between us. "You stood, Ember. They saw it. You made 'em see it." Tears blurred my vision, not of weakness, but of release. For the first time in so long, I hadn't hidden. I hadn't begged. I had spoken, and the night itself seemed to have listened. That was the moment I realized safety wasn't just something Silas gave me. It was something I had begun to carry inside myself. A fragile thing, maybe, but alive. And no matter how many shadows came knocking, I swore to myself I would never again let them take that spark away. The morning after the rider left, the cabin felt like it was holding its breath. Every board, every nail seemed to wait with me, braced for the sound of hooves returning. I moved through the rooms quietly, my steps light as if I didn't want to disturb whatever fragile safety had settled in for the night. My pistol lay on the table, not hidden away anymore, but close enough that I could touch it with a single reach. Silas moved like a shadow, silent but steady, checking the shutters, leaning his ear toward the wind as though it carried warnings only he could hear. I asked him once, my voice soft in the early light, "Do you think they'll come back?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, as simple and sure as the sun rising. And instead of crumbling at that answer, I felt something inside me stiffen into resolve. If they were coming, then I would be ready. That day we worked without speaking much, yet every task felt like a conversation. He split wood with measured strikes, and I carried the pieces inside, stacking them against the wall. He dug shallow trenches near the fence posts, and I followed behind, pressing stones into the gaps with my hands until my nails tore. He showed me how to listen differently, not just for sound, but for silence, the way the air shifts when something foreign enters it, the way a horse on hard ground echoes different than one on soft. I held on to those lessons like rope, something to grip when fear threatened to drag me under. My hands trembled the first time he asked me to load the rifle, the powder spilling across the table like black sand. But Silas just waited, his eyes steady on mine. "Try again," he said, and I did. Again and again until my fingers steadied, until I could pour the powder without losing a grain. That night, sitting by the fire, I admitted in a whisper, "I'm scared." The words felt like weakness, but they carried the truth of my bones. Silas didn't lift his head from where he was sharpening his knife, didn't try to soothe me with empty comfort. He just said, "So am I." And somehow that made me braver. Knowing he wasn't carved from stone, that fear was something we both carried, made it easier to breathe. Fear wasn't failure. It was a sign we had something worth keeping. Every corner of the cabin began to change under our hands. I sewed old curtains into thick drapes so no lantern light would slip through and betray us at night. He strung a line of tin cans along the trail, so even the faintest step would rattle a warning. I dug a small hole beneath the floorboards and filled it with matches, powder, and a bit of food. Our last defense if fire became the only weapon left to us. The ash we scattered across the floor crunched under our boots, a sound I began to find comfort in, because silence meant danger, but noise meant we were still here, still moving. In the stillness between tasks, I caught myself studying him, the way his jaw set when he worked, patience in his hands, the scars that spoke of battles he didn't share out loud. Once I asked him, "Why do you stay, Silas? Why risk all this for me?" He looked at me, his eyes not soft but certain, and said, "Because you deserve to stand." That word, stand, rooted itself deep inside me. Not survive, not hide, but stand. It meant I wasn't a burden, not some broken thing he was carrying. I was someone beside him, someone worth the fight. For the first time in my life, I believed it. When the sun fell and the world outside turned black, we sat side by side on the porch, our mugs warm in our hands, the night pressing in around us. "They'll keep looking," I said, staring at the horizon as if I could see them already. He didn't argue, didn't tell me it would all be fine. He just said, "Then we'll keep standing." And I nodded, because that was enough. We couldn't stop what might come, but we could refuse to bow beneath it. That promise was stronger than any wall we built. I used to think safety was a place, a room with locked doors, a hidden corner where no one could find me. But in those days of preparation, I learned that safety was a person too. It was Silas handing me a rifle without doubt. It was the scrape of his knife on stone reminding me we weren't helpless. It was the ash under my feet telling me every step mattered. Safety was knowing I wasn't facing the dark alone. As we patched walls and prepared defenses, we weren't just building barriers against the world outside. We were building something inside too, a truth I could finally cling to, that I wasn't running anymore, that for the first time, I belonged to a fight that was mine to share, not one forced upon me. And maybe, just maybe, that belonging was stronger than any threat waiting on the ridge. It was Widow Blackwell who first said his name out loud. I remember the way her lips pressed around it, like she hated giving the man the dignity of being spoken. "Jebediah Crow," she whispered, her eyes narrowing as if even the memory of him might crawl across the room and settle in the corners. I felt the name like a stone dropped into my chest. It didn't belong to the stranger who came to the farm asking questions, nor the rider who lingered too long near the fence line. This name belonged to something larger, heavier, a shadow that seemed to reach further than the horizon itself. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the narrow bed, the lantern turned low, and every creak of the walls sounded like his hands dragging along the timber. I pressed my palms to my face and whispered, "Don't take me back." The words weren't prayer exactly, but they had the same ache of pleading. Silas heard me, though he pretended he didn't. He sat in the chair near the door, rifle leaned against his leg, hat tilted low. "He won't touch you again," he said, not lifting his head. His voice was so certain it rattled against the doubt in me. "Silas," I asked, my throat raw, "how can you know?" He looked up then, his eyes like stone. Because I won't allow it. The next day, the truth spilled out in pieces, each heavier than the last. Crow wasn't just a preacher, though that's what he called himself. He had a camp hidden deep in the hollow, a place where hymns turned into shackles and sermons turned into cages. They called it sanctuary, but it was nothing holy. I remember the sound of his voice, slick and sharp, promising salvation if we obeyed, threatening fire if we questioned. I remember the children, small and hollow-eyed, forced to stand still while he spoke of sin as if it was carved into their bones. And I remembered myself, silent, numb, convinced that if I stayed quiet enough, maybe I would vanish. As I spoke, Silas didn't interrupt. He just listened, his hands folded over his knees, jaw tight enough that I could see the muscle twitch. "He takes," I said, my voice trembling. "He takes women, children, anyone who's weak enough to believe they have nowhere else to go. And once you're inside, there's no leaving." My chest tightened with the memory of it. The walls of that hollow were more than wood and stone. They were made of fear. Fear of him, fear of God, twisted into his image. "He branded me with silence," I whispered. "Made me believe I was less than breath." My fingers curled into my skirt until the knuckles burned. Silas leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "You are not silence anymore." The words cracked something open in me. For so long, I had carried Crow's voice inside my head, like a second heart, beating doubt into me. But here was Silas, steady and unshakable, replacing that rhythm with something I could trust. The fear didn't vanish. It lived in me still, coiled and ready. Every time I thought of the hollow, I could smell the smoke of the fire pits, hear the low murmur of prayers that were nothing but chains. I thought of the women who never lifted their eyes, the children who never laughed, the men who bowed lower with each passing day. They were still there, still trapped under his voice. The guilt pressed heavy against me, sharper than hunger, colder than the night air. Why had I been the one to walk away? Why was I free when so many remained bound? One evening, when the sun bled out across the fields, I asked Silas, "What if they come for me? What if Crow himself rides down that road?" He didn't answer right away. He studied the horizon, the line where the world seemed to fall away. Finally, he said, "Then we face him." I swallowed hard, fear clawing at me, but then he added, "Not just me, you too." And that was the difference. I wasn't a girl cowering in the corner anymore. I wasn't the silence he had carved. I was a woman with a voice, a woman who had learned to hold a pistol steady, a woman who had begun to believe she was worth standing for. That night I dreamed of the hollow again, but it was different. In the dream, I stood inside its circle of fire, Crow's voice thundering. But when he pointed at me, demanding I bow, I didn't. I raised my head. My scar caught the firelight, my hands didn't tremble, and when I opened my mouth, the sound that came out was not silence, but my own name. Ember Clara McCrae. I woke with tears on my cheeks, but for the first time, they weren't born of fear. They were born of something else, something close to hope. Crow's shadow still loomed. I knew it would until the day we faced him. But I wasn't hiding anymore. Silas had taught me how to listen for the shift in the air, and I could hear it now. The world turning, the silence breaking. And somewhere deep in me, a truth was beginning to form. The hollow had stolen years of my life, but it would not steal the rest. Not while I had breath, not while I had a name, and not while Silas McCrae sat watch at my side. The night we chose to fight back wasn't marked by thunder or storm. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you lean forward, straining to hear what isn't there. Widow Blackwell had lit a lantern in the center of her kitchen table, and its glow caught the edges of her face, deepening the lines carved by years of grief and grit. Silas sat opposite her, shoulders square, his hat pushed back so I could see his eyes clear and steady. And I sat between them, feeling like a tether pulled from both ends. I wanted to collapse into fear, to hide beneath the weight of what was coming. But their presence steadied me. Their certainty felt like hands pressed against my back, urging me forward. Widow spoke first. Crow's reach is long, but not untouchable. He hides behind scripture and threats, but he bleeds like any other man. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. And I'll be damned before I let him steal another child. Her words lit something in me. I thought of the faces still trapped in Sanctuary Hollow, the hollow-eyed children and booed women, their silence stitched by Crow's voice. I could see them as clear as if they sat across from me, waiting for me to speak for them. My chest tightened, my throat raw. "We can't leave them," I whispered. "If we turn away, I'll be no better than him. I survived, I don't even know why, but I can't stand still while they're still in chains." Silas's hand brushed against mine under the table, just the smallest touch, but it anchored me. "Then we go in," he said. His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight, his breath measured like a man staring down the edge of a cliff. "We go in, we cut the roots, and we bring them out." I shook my head, fear breaking through my resolve. "You don't know what it's like. He doesn't just hold them with ropes and fences. He holds them with their own shame, with their belief that leaving is sin. Some of them won't follow, even if the gates are thrown wide." Widow leaned forward until her face caught the full circle of the lantern light. "Then you remind them," she said firmly. "You show them what it means to walk out. You're living proof, Ember. He doesn't own you. He doesn't own any of them." The room fell silent. The lantern flickered, and for a heartbeat, I thought I might crumble under the weight of what she was asking of me. But then I remembered the dream I'd had, the firelight on my scar, my voice rising above his commands, the sound of my own name cutting through his lies. Ember Clara McCrae. It wasn't just a dream, it was a calling. I lifted my head and looked at both of them. If we do this, it won't be just bullets and fists. It'll be words too. He'll use them like chains. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. I'll stand. I'll speak, even if my voice breaks, even if they don't believe me. I'll show them someone who walked away and lived. Silas's eyes softened, though his body stayed taut like a bowstring. "That's all we need," he said quietly. "One spark is enough to start a fire." We began planning, not with maps or drawn lines, but with scraps of memory. I told them the layout of the hollow, the long hall where he preached, the sheds where the children were kept, the watch posts along the ridge. Widow knew the paths through the woods, the streams that could mask our tracks, the bends where riders might wait. Silas listened more than he spoke, his silence heavy but sure, like he was already seeing it unfold. As the hours passed, my fear shifted. It didn't vanish, but it took on a new shape. It wasn't the fear of being dragged back or silenced again. It was fear of failing, of letting down the ones who still waited in that darkness, but laced with it was something else. Fire, steady and slow, not consuming, but fueling. I could feel it building in my chest, matching the lantern's glow, spilling into my veins. At one point, I caught Silas studying me. His eyes weren't questioning, weren't weighing whether I was strong enough. They were steady, filled with something like quiet pride. It made me straighten in my chair, made me believe I was more than the broken girl I used to be. Before we parted that night, Widow placed her hand over mine. "He thinks he's untouchable," she said. "But men like Crow fall the hardest. They think fear makes them kings. Truth is, fear makes them fragile. All it takes is one voice loud enough to crack the silence." I carried her words with me as we stepped out into the night. The stars stretched wide above us, clear and unyielding. Silas walked at my side, his shadow long across the dirt. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was hiding in his. I felt like I was walking beside him, equal in this fight. As we neared the farmhouse, Silas stopped and turned to me. "You're ready?" he said. His tone wasn't hopeful or encouraging. It was matter of fact, like he was stating the weather. "You're more than ready." I swallowed my chest tight. What if I falter? He shook his head. "Then I'll be there, but you won't." I didn't answer, not with words. I just let the silence between us stretch, filled not with chains, but with choice. And in that silence, I knew. The next time I faced Crow, I would not face him as Silence. I would face him as Ember Clara McCrae, and I would not bow. When the dust finally settled over Sanctuary Hollow, I remember the strangest feeling wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief. It was quiet, a kind of quiet I hadn't heard in years. Not since before chains and sermons and nights filled with whispers of obedience. That silence wasn't empty. It was full of voices I knew would rise again, not in fear, but in freedom. I stood there, watching the smoke lift from the broken buildings, and felt the weight slide off my chest. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without counting each breath like it might be stolen from me. I looked at Silas, and he looked back, his face as weathered and unreadable as ever, but I knew. I knew because his hand brushed mine, not to hold, but just to let me know I wasn't standing there alone. He had carried me from the barn that night when he could have turned me away. He had fought for me when I was too lost to fight for myself. And now here he was, steady as stone, reminding me that even broken ground can grow something strong if you tend it long enough. I thought of Widow Blackwell, too, and the fire in her voice when she said fear makes tyrants fragile. She was right. Crow had wrapped himself in scripture and power, but in the end it only took one spark, one word spoken out loud, to unravel him. That word was my name. Ember Clara McCrae. It was mine to claim, mine to keep, and mine to carry into the future. Later, when we led the others out from the hollow, I felt the trembling of children's hands in mine, the hesitation in their steps. They weren't sure the world outside would welcome them. I knew that fear. I knew the weight of believing you didn't belong anywhere. But as we walked past the gates, I whispered to them, "You're not his anymore. You never were." Saying it aloud cracked something open inside me. It was like telling it to myself, like carving the truth into my own bones. That night, sitting by the fire, I thought about redemption. Not the kind men like Crow preached, traded for obedience or bought with suffering. No, redemption wasn't about paying with pain. It was about choosing to live when everything in you once wanted to die. It was about standing up again and again, even when the world called you worthless. Redemption wasn't a crown handed down. It was a dollar's worth, simple, small, and hard-earned, but enough to buy back the piece of yourself they tried to steal. That's what I held now, a dollar's worth of redemption, and it was mine. Silas asked me once what I'd do now that the hollow was behind me. I didn't have an answer then, not really. But tonight, as I sit here with the embers of the fire burning low, I think I do. I'll live. That's all. I'll live, and I'll keep walking forward, and when I see someone still trapped in their own hollow, be it made of wood or fear or shame, I'll stop. I'll reach out. I'll say, "You're not his anymore. You never were." Because sometimes, all it takes is one voice. I think of my mama sometimes, and of Clara, the name she whispered into my ear when I was small, the name I buried for years because it hurt too much to carry. But it's mine again now. Ember Clara McCrae. I carry her in that name, and I carry myself too. Maybe that's the greatest lesson in all of this, that no one can take from you the fire that's truly yours. They can bury it, smother it, lie to you until you doubt it, but they cannot kill it. If you're listening to my story right now, maybe you know what I mean. Maybe you've felt that weight too. The one that makes you believe you're nothing more than what someone else decided you are. But I'm telling you, you are more. You are worth more. Even if all you can hold in your hand feels like a single dollar's worth of redemption, it is enough. It is more than enough to start again. Silas and I, we don't speak much about what comes next. We don't need to. The truth is in the rhythm of our days, the way he sets his rifle down by the door at dusk, the way I hum now when I braid my hair, the way the silence between us is no longer a prison but a home. I don't dream of chains anymore. I dream of voices, children laughing, women singing, men working, not out of fear but choice. I dream of a world where the hollow is not remembered for the pain it caused, but for the lives that walked free from it. So if you've walked with me through this story, if you've felt even a piece of it in your own bones, I hope you'll carry it forward. I hope you'll light a fire where someone else feels only cold. That's the only way the world changes, one ember at a time. And before you go, I'll ask something of you. If this story has touched you, if you found a spark in it, leave me a comment and tell me what you carried away. Like this video, share it so another soul might hear it, and follow the channel so you don't miss the next story waiting to be told. Your voice matters, and when you lend it here, it joins mine, and together we make the silence break. This is Ember Clara McCrae, and this is my truth. We are never only what was done to us. We are what we choose to keep alive. And I have chosen fire.